In this exercise, I'll introduce you to how sharpening works inside of Photoshop. I also want you to have a sense of what sharpening can and can't do. Despite the fact that sharpening is the foremost filtering effect inside of Photoshop, so much so, by the way, that if you go to the filter menu and choose sharpen, you'll see a total of 5 commands available in this submenu, and that's not quite everything. There's a couple of other sharpening features that we'll see as well. So Photoshop is throwing a lot of commands at the task of sharpening, and Photoshop is an exceedingly powerful program, but the one thing you have to remember about Photoshop is that it cannot generate detail where no detail exists. So, for example, just as when you resample an image, that is, you increase the number of pixels or decrease the number of pixels, you're not going to suddenly add clarity. Those new pixels, if you upsample the image, are merely transitional pixels. They're not making up new detail that was there in that original scene, but the camera somehow did not pick up. And the same goes for sharpness of focus. Ultimately, that is an optical effect. Focus is captured by the camera as you shoot the image. After that, you can't generate new focus. So here I am working inside this image called macrobutterfly.jpg. It's found inside the 15 sharpen folder. And I'm going to press Control 1 or Command 1 on the Mac to go ahead and zoom the image to 100% so that we're devoting one screen pixel to every image pixel. Now, I shot this image using an Olympus E30. And if you're ever curious about what kind of lens, for example, was used to capture an image, and it was captured with a digital SLR, then you can go up to the File menu and you can choose the File Info command, or press Control-Shift-Alt-I, Command-Shift-Option-I on the Mac, and then switch from the description panel to camera data right there. And this is the EXIF data that was captured by the camera at the moment the image was shot. So you can see that, sure enough, the make is Olympus, the model is E30. If we drop down here, you can see that I was using a 14 to 54 millimeter lens, which was the stock lens that shipped along with the camera. Notice the focal length is 54 millimeters. So, if you will, I was zoomed all the way in. I'll go ahead and cancel out of this dialog box here. And as a result, we have a very shallow plane of focus. That is to say, because this is a macro image, we've probably got a few millimeters of information, of depth, that is to say, that's in focus. Everything else is drifting out of focus. So this butterfly's eye is in focus. Its proboscis, this curlicue right here, is in focus. This knee right here of its leg is in focus. This rear leg, though, is completely out of focus. And there's no way I'm going to change that. I'm not going to bring the out of focus details into focus no matter how hard I try, unless I go in there and hand generate detail. And over the years, I've received so many heartbreaking photos from folks, once-in-a-lifetime photos that are blurry. They ask me, how do I bring out the detail? And the answer is, I'm afraid you can't. You have to shoot the image in focus in the first place in order to sharpen it effectively inside of Photoshop. That said, if you're working with an image with good focus, you can make that detail absolutely tactile on screen. You can make it leap off the page using sharpening. So let's see how that works. I'll go up to the filter menu, I'll choose sharpen, and I'm going to choose this command here. Without going into detail about how this command works, we'll see that in future exercises. If you loaded D keys, you've got a keyboard shortcut of Shift F6. That brings up this big dialog box here. I'll go ahead and drag the head of the butterfly over a little bit inside this in dialog box preview. Here are my default settings. That is an amount of 100%, radius of 1.0, remove set to Gaussian blur, more accurate turned off. It's very important for now. I'm going to go ahead and maximize this amount value so that we get as much sharpening as possible from this filter. Now, this is more sharpening than we need. We're actually over sharpening the image for the sake of demonstration. Notice if I click and hold inside of this preview here, I'll see the before version of the butterfly. As soon as I release, I see the after version. So you can see the difference we're making. I'll go ahead and click OK in order to accept that effect. And just to make sure that the effects of the Smart Sharpen filter survive the transition to video, I'm going to go ahead and zoom this image in here to 200%. This is the before version of the butterfly, and this is the after version. What Photoshop is doing where sharpening is concerned is it's exaggerating edge contrast. So an edge is an area of rapid luminance transition inside of the image. For example, right here we've got an edge. We go from bright pixels in the background to very dark pixels inside of the leg extremely rapidly, just over the course of a few pixels here. And what Photoshop does when we apply a sharpening filter it goes ahead and takes the light side of the edge and makes it slightly lighter, and it takes the dark side of the edge and makes it slightly darker. So it's actually tracing tiny lines, as we'll see in a future exercise. And what that does is it makes our eyes lock on to that feature, because we're trained as human beings to read areas of rapid luminance transition as sharp edges. Now notice what happens to sharply focused details like this leg here. It appears more tactile, more articulated than ever, versus what happens to areas that are not in focus like this rear leg. That doesn't really look any better than it did before. So this is the before version of the image. This is the after version. Really all we're doing in those areas of low focus is we're bringing out noise. And noise, of course, is random luminance variations between neighboring pixels. So anywhere where you have good detail, you get more articulated detail, more tactile detail, if you will. Anywhere where you have low detail, you get more noise. And that's what's going on with sharpening inside Photoshop.